Let's chat.
It's hard.
You want to talk?
I know, that's disappointing.
Sit back. Let's work this
How's
out.
it going?
What are we
That's
doing
pretty
here?
neat.
Where are you going?
Hey there.
Wow.
It's not always easy. It's amazing if you think about it.
Let's think
This
about
seems
this.
strange.
I have some thoughts about that. Life is hard.
Trauma bonded.
I got to do my first full-length interview yesterday.
Ooh, who'd you interview?
And I can't tell you.
Oh, okay.
And it wasn't the jumping off interview like Whit did do the first interview, but I got to do the follow-up interview.
I'm not really sure what your process is. Is it like I know you do a pre-interview.
Well, there usually isn't a follow-up interview. It's only if maybe portions of the audio were corrupted, and so we just need them to literally like restate it with better audio, or two, maybe the point isn't made clear enough, and so we just need more clarity on an item, or we need something to help develop an ending better, or tie concepts together, stuff like that.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it was kind of a big deal.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm kind of excited about it, but by doing that to help out the team, I am going to be taking on more of the trauma, I guess,
Oh,
of people's
okay.
stories. So we'll see how I do.
Yeah.
Another episode that we're not qualified to talk about.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking that same exact.
We're not qualified to talk about this, but we will.
As we always do.
Welcome to Trauma Bonded. I'm Elly Westberg here with Therese Garcia.
Hello.
And today we're discussing, this is actually happening, episode 311. And this is a working title. What if you danced for those who couldn't dance?
I like that.
Erin introduces herself as a member of indigenous nations and who she is as a way for accountability, intent, and cultural perspective. She is also from Canada and the Great Plains. Her grandparents were forced into residential schools as children, which was a schooling system that was cultural genocidal program. Kids were forced into these boarding schools as entities were, quote, trying to kill the Indian in the child, end quote, and assimilate children into so-called civilized society. Forced to practice Christianity, give up their native language, and they were really just used as a labor force. This was a partnership between churches and government to assimilate indigenous people, separated from family, abused by priests and people of God. Their hair was cut, their names were changed, they were isolated from their own siblings, and a recent discovery of mass graves brought mainstream attention to it. These schools produced adults who went unloved their entire upbringing and were made to feel shamed and then released into a racist society ill-equipped to survive. And these failings produced her mother. She had no parents and was surrounded by drugs and alcohol, and this led to her own negative behavior. Erin was raised being moved around a lot, in and out of the foster care system, knew too much by the time she was 5 years old. Her grandparents rescued her for some years. She gets closer with her father and her stepmother, who had a maternal bone, and this helped start positive family memories. Her mother then took her back, and she was parentified. It was normal to her that people around her would die young and unnaturally. Her mom was proud of her heritage and instilled some tradition in her children. There was violence in the home with her mom and her partners, and Erin leaves home as a teenager to save herself. She sets boundaries to save herself. At 18, with the help of supportive teachers and principals, she is able to graduate. She goes on to university where she encounters education, but also immerses in opportunities in art space research around the suicide epidemic and theater training. She had community and family and challenged the status quo with them together. She's growing whilst her mom is having a really hard time. Her mom ends up losing her siblings to the foster care system, and it causes her to lose her mind. Erin is living a double life, flourishing, and family. At 21 years old, at Standing Rock Reserve protest, she receives a text from her sister. Quote, "She's gone. Her mother has passed and is at peace. Erin is there in her homelands, and her mother dies. The ancestors were there for her, comforting her. In her grief, she is more alive. She walks with a sense of lineage. She dances for those who can't dance. She carries the blood memory of her people, and now she celebrates herself and her siblings and their work to fight generational trauma." And full disclosure, I'm the showrunner for This Is Actually Happening, and T knows nothing about anything. She comes in fresh, and this show, Trauma/Bonded, is for the listeners, a space where we can talk about each episode, digest it, and reflect on it with empathy and also a bit of levity. That's Trauma Bonded. T, what stuck out to you as the heart of Erin's story?
I went with one word for the heart today, and that word is warrior. I mean, throughout her life, she is a warrior.
So true.
In general, she has to find this balance, I think, of both honoring and fighting her past generations. But, throughout her life, she's protecting her siblings. She's fighting to stay healthy, not following her mom's footsteps. She's also advocating for herself, her culture, educating herself and not erasing her past, her lineage. She also talks a lot about, at the end here, how it's revolutionary to give and receive love unconditionally.
Mm-hmm.
And she's honoring her own life so that she can honor her future generations. So she's breaking that cycle, which is a awfully hard thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
Thanks.
My heart is not one word, but I thought the heart of the story was something that she says, even though life is hard, there's always a moment where someone says, "I believe in you." And I feel like all throughout her story, there's little instances of people that are looking out for her, maybe in a way that they're not even aware of, but that she takes to heart and helps to build some hope in her. Like she talks about this maternal bone of her stepmom, where it felt like family for a few years. And she talks about how it was tough that she didn't know it and then knew it, and then it was ripped away from her. But I feel like an example, even if it's temporary like that, can give you an idea of how life can be different, and in that way holds, as devastating as it is to lose it, it still helps you hold hope in your heart for something better. And then she talks about like her Auntie Glenda, who showed her sobriety and tradition, and then of course these amazing teachers and her principal and her professors and her university community. All of these people were sort of bright lights on her journey. And then of course herself. I mean, we can't discount how she took care of herself. You're right. She is a warrior. The way that she was able to, even to leave at such a young age and be able to set boundaries, that was her believing in herself. And it's like, bitch, where'd you get this? Where'd this come from?
I think those hearts work hand in hand, right?
I think so too. Yeah. Let's go back and talk about how she introduces herself. I think this was like already really powerful. And she talks about how and I'm not going to repeat what she said because
right,
I don't know everything that she said. It's just unfamiliarity, but she talks about how she introduces herself because it helps with accountability and intent. And I think that is a really powerful way to navigate the world, because it's so true. If you lead with, "I am blank, who is from this, who prides herself on this, who is this, da da da," Like, if you lead with that, it makes it really hard to be an asshole after that, right? Because now you're representing.
Yeah.
You're being held to account
Yeah.
for what you're representing. And I mean, I don't really have any culture in my background. All my culture is non-culture. I don't think you can say Seinfeld is a way to live. But it made me think of like my friend Betsy. She has like 5 words that she always reiterates to herself about herself.
Oh.
So maybe she doesn't introduce herself like, "Hi, I'm Betsy. I'm kind. I'm empathetic. I'm curious." But it's something that she tells herself all the time so that she's being accountable to herself. I am kind. I am empathetic. I am curious. I'm a listener. These things that we tell ourselves, especially when we're about to go into a new situation or meet someone new, just reminders of who we are to ourselves and how to be. And I don't know, I might be making a leap here. Tell me if I am. It reminded me of like the movie The Help, where what's her face is telling what's her face like, you is kind, you is smart, you is important, right? There's this repetition of and reminders of values that we have. Or even back further, like SNL.
Oh.
Stuart, what was the guy's name? Stuart Smiley?
Something like that, yeah.
Where he's like, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough,
Yeah.
and gosh darn it, people like me. And
Yeah.
again, maybe this is a leap, but you see what I'm trying to explain here. It's like there's power in reminding yourself of who you are or who you're trying to be or how you want the world to see you and what you're going to lead with. From a different perspective, it's also kind of phony baloney when you state who you are. See, this is why this example doesn't necessarily work. Because if I was like, I'm fun, you'd be like, Elly, show, don't tell, right?
Right.
So if I can't just say like, how could you be mad at me? I'm kind. Like I told you I was kind. Because there's action behind that stuff too.
Yeah, no, I mean, I liked where you were going in the beginning.
Then I derailed.
But I think with her, she's talking a lot about her ancestry, right? And what family or area her family's from.
Yeah.
And possibly there are things that people understand about what that means without giving actual traits, I guess. Gives you some space instead of saying I'm kind. You know, it's more complex than that, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of it. She's stating who she is. So you understand that she's got like some culture behind her, that she's coming at a place from like a devastating blood memory, or that she and her people understand what it is to suffer.
Yeah, and it's honoring, like we were talking about, it's honoring her past, her history.
Yeah.
And respecting that that's where she's coming from. But I still liked the way that you were saying, maybe as an inner mantra, you know, I'm kind, empathetic, I'm a listener. I feel like if you remind yourself of that, especially in hard times or new situations or something, it'll
help you with intent. Yeah.
It can be empowering and help you be the best that you can be. You know, because we live sometimes so unconsciously, just like going about our business and not thinking, is this aligned with how I'd like my best self to be?
Yeah. When I used to date regularly, I would stand in front of the mirror, like before I went to meet him or he came over or whatever. And I would go, well, this is what you built. So this is what he gets. Don't get scared now. I don't know if that's to do with it at all. But there's something about, I don't know, checking in with yourself about yourself before you face other people, like as a way to give yourself, some sort of internal accountability or intent. I think there's power in it. I mean, there's power in words. Maybe you're really shitty at being empathetic. You're really shitty at being a good listener, but you want to remind yourself that that's what your objective is. That's what you're trying to be.
Yeah, it just got me thinking about, if you're going into a social situation, like, it's going to be the worst.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I actually do enjoy these things. And I was like, no, they're like, why are you thinking?
Yeah.
Like, if you have insecurities or something, like, just checking back in, like, hey.
Yeah. People like you, Elly. It's going to be fine.
And you like the people. Why are you doing all that?
I know. It's the worst when you get in your head and something about that, like something like that.
But how great would it be if you were able to call back to your past generations and people understand it?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, I have a better idea of where she's coming from.
Yeah.
But that can also shoot you in the foot if your people ain't done the best shit. Like, I am Elly. I am Catholic. Like, okay.
No, but you're not Catholic.
I'm not. I know, but if I led with that, I'm Elly. I come from fundamentalist nut jobs.
Yeah.
Who spoke in tongues.
I mean, that gives an interesting perspective already.
It does. It does help set the scene. It gives a little bit of insight as to who you are, where you come from, and where you're going to go, I guess. It's interesting to think about. I think we've talked about it long enough. Did you know about these indigenous schools, T?
I did not know.
I remember reading some stuff about it. It's weird because it's in one instance, you're shocked to hear that this was intentional. And then in another thought, you're like, no, this tracks with what these entities have done for millennia to people.
Yeah.
So fucked up.
So fucked up. I just kept thinking about our kids and just, oh God, it would change you forever at such a young age.
Well, in the last residential school was open all the way up till 1996. I did a little bit of research.
Oh.
The school system was created to isolate indigenous children from the influence of their own culture and religion in order to assimilate them into a dominant Canadian culture. Over the course of the system's more than 100-year existence, around 150,000 children were placed in residential schools nationally. And they were created by Christian churches and the Canadian government as an attempt to both educate and convert. However, the schools disrupted lives and communities, causing long-term problems among Indigenous peoples. They operated all across Canadian provinces. There was a total of 139 residential schools, but that number does exclude schools that operated without federal support. In 2015, there was a commission, concluded that what happened was, quote unquote, cultural genocide. Identified more than 3,000 children who died from disease due to overcrowding, malnutrition, and poor sanitation, or died after being abused or trying to run away. And then another stat says that more than 6,000 children died while at residential schools. And guess who was behind it? The Catholic Church ran over half of the residential schools in Canada. Are we shocked?
Not shocked, but horrified. How do we...
Just so blatant.
So blatant. And then it's like, oh, we're still doing this whole Catholic thing. Okay. It's weird.
There's a pile of bad shit, and we just keep going back. Is that trauma bonded? That is trauma bonded.
Oh, yeah. That's the actual
actual meaning of it. It's when the abuser keeps going back to the abused has a bond with the abuser. Yeah. Let's get rid of the Catholic Church. Can I say that? Is my car going to get blown up? Can we just get rid of it? Fuck's sake. So there's all this trauma and abuse perpetuated in these schools, and they're unloved, totally shamed. You're told that everything that you come from is wrong, and then you're sent out to a world that does not love you and that is racist against you. You're facing systemic racism, and you literally have zero tools to cope with it. So, of course, people are going to turn to...
Yeah. And you can't even talk to anybody because you don't understand the language yet. And they're trying to teach it to you and erase your language.
Yeah. Punish you for speaking in tongues you know.
Yeah. God forbid you talk to your friend in that language.
Well, and then you've got no semblance of family. You're separated from siblings.
You're completely isolated.
Like, they really, truly are trying to root everything out of you that you know. It's so evil. It's so barbaric.
But like justified, like the people who are doing this feel like they're doing the right thing.
Well, that's how colonizers justify, right? We had to run these people off of our land, or this land, for progress. We showed up and these people were here. We had to run them off. We have to justify why. Let's talk about blood memory. This is reminiscent to me of epigenetics, right?
Just for our listeners, can you explain what epigenetics means?
It's the study of changes in organisms caused by modification of gene expression rather than alteration of the genetic code itself. In simple terms, epigenetics is the study of how your behaviors and environment can cause changes that affect the way your genes work.
We're not doctors.
We're not doctors. Anyways, let's talk about blood memory.
Yeah.
Blood memory is the belief that we carry the wisdom of our ancestors and our culture in our blood.
The idea that like our generational or family memories are living in our veins.
Yeah.
This one is interesting. And maybe that's why she identifies herself as such, because of blood memory as well.
Let's talk about that few years that she was in what she calls an intact family, or some sort of semblance of a family, with her getting to know her father and her stepmother. How do you think that played in her life to have some like stable years like that?
I think it's like you described in the beginning with your heart. It's kind of like she had these moments where she could see what it was like to be in a healthy environment. And I think it helped her envision what that could be like for her as well. But for it to be, ripped away, when she was around 11 is pretty tragic.
It's like devastating, yeah, to a kid, but it did teach her that there was an alternate way of living. And I think it also gave her this incredible ability to separate addiction from people.
Mm-hmm.
Because she was able to recognize when her father and her stepmother were really trying and having this stable family unit, that they also weren't using, and to see that crumbled and fell away because addiction started back up. She was able to see addiction clearly for what it was. And I think that that's also something that's woven all throughout this episode, is this idea of addiction and how pervasive it is, how damaging it is, how it can destroy people's lives truly. And it's especially personified in that moment, right, when she's already moved out of the house and she's barely making it. She's a student, she's a waitress, she's been couch surfing, she's got a little bit of money, her mom asks her for it, and she puts it to her mom right then and there. She says, "Do you want alcohol and drugs, or do you want me? Do you want your family?" Or what did she say?
If you love drugs and alcohol more than me, take the money.
Thank you. I wrote that down too. I was just on the wrong page. If you love drugs and alcohol more than you love me, take the money. I mean, talk about really putting a bottom bright line under this whole thing. And it's in those moments where you're supposed to be able to like really analyze yourself in a situation and go, well, of course I love you more than drugs and alcohol. I don't want your money. But that's the addiction talking. The addiction says, I have to have this. It's not an issue of love. It's I have to have this to go on. I have to have this to survive. And for her to see so clearly that at that moment, again, it's not her mom, it's her mom, and there's her mom and there's addiction. Just like she's able to hold in her mind that she loves her mom but she's also a hard person to live near and amongst. And I think this is a powerful lesson for all of us to be able to hold these two things in your mind at the same time. This is an instance where a boundary must be made. And she made that boundary. What a freaking wise adolescent, right?
Yeah. Not to say it wasn't painful when she chose the money.
Of course. Boundaries are always going to be painful. Always, always, always. So her stepmother and her father fall back into addiction. She goes back with her mother. And then she talks about having to take care of everyone. And this is where she's really entering this era of parentification. And this is something that we hear about a lot. And this is also part of trauma when you are parentified as a child, meaning that you are taking on the role as a parent. Children are meant to be children, parents are meant to be parents, and neither two should cross over into the other. And every time it does, there's problems, right? Parents child this, child parentified, it's a big fucking mess. And I mean, again, this is where boundaries come in, but I think oftentimes parentification of children is very slow, and it's evolutionary, and it just all of a sudden you look back and realize that it's happened, and it carries its trauma in its own way. What do you think about that? I mean, I'm sure in your house you make very specific decisions to not unintentionally or intentionally parentify your children.
No, I definitely want them to enjoy their childhood and have their innocence. Though, responsibility is a good thing. It's not having the weight of the world on you would be nice.
Yes. And that is a good distinction to make. Learning, growth, responsibility, etc. That's one thing. But yes, having the weight of adult problems on your shoulders, having the weight of caring for other human beings on your shoulders, is not a good thing. What do you think about Auntie Glenda? I just feel like she just keeps pointing out just like these little bright lights kind of keep her going. And she's a great example of a sober adult who is interested in preserving and living their traditions.
She had her own addictions before, but was able to get out of that, which may have brought her hope for her mom, but maybe not as well.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
But again, she could see like examples.
An example. Yeah, because she talks a lot about this internalized racism that at some point you just kind of go, I'm going to end up like a loser native alcoholic person who dies an unnatural violent death at a young age. That's so internalized in people around her, and for her to be able to escape that at some point, I think it's imperative that there are examples like her Auntie Glenda to show her that there is another way. And she talks about confusion fatigue, to love a person but also see that they're wrong. As a kid, to see that kind of thing over and over and over again, I could see how it would cause you fatigue. I mean, that's what intelligence is. It's holding two opposing ideas in your head at the same time and not going mental, right? You're able to see both. But as a kid, you don't know that yet. You don't know that it's causing you growth, but it makes you feel confused. This person is someone I love. This person is a person that has shown me care on multiple occasions. This person is someone that truly tries to look out for me, yet I see them in a million ways making wrong decisions all the time, in decisions that hurt me or hurt people that I know that they care about. And it's like, why are you doing this? And I think this is a child's point of view in not understanding, 1, the weight of the world, or 2, generational trauma, or 3, addiction. And I think we touched about a bit on this last episode, confusion fatigue with regard to religion.
And then also in regard to abuse and why isn't dad stop? Like, this is clearly the wrong thing to be doing. But why is no one stopping? There's so many people here. No
Yeah.
one's gonna do anything. But yeah, they talk a big game about religion, helping people out, but it's cool to abuse me physically and see my...
Yeah, it's like it does not compute. And I think that can really damages the kid too. Confusion fatigue. It's not a peaceful place to live in.
But then the other part of, being a good mother and not being addicted, and the other part of it is understanding where her mom came from and why.
Yeah. It's just we're not really capable as kids as completely understanding that. So it's this living and seeing, and people are messy, people are hypocritical, people are contradictions, and as kids, in kid mind, I think we're really obsessed with like fairness and justice. We see the world in black and white terms.
Yeah.
So when those sorts of ways to see the world fall away, it can be really, really confusing and damaging. It's so hard to be a kid.
It's scary. If someone does something different from what you're used to or what you expect, it could be really scary.
Yeah. And she was and then she finally leaves home. She saves herself. She sets these boundaries. But she is grieving in a lot of ways. She feels like she's grieving the loss of her mother to drugs and alcohol. I think that's when she talks about being on the bus and she just is sobbing. It's not just that her mother chose those things over her, but it's that she's never going to have the mother that she wants to have. Her mother's never going to be okay. If in that stark moment of reality, choose me over drugs and alcohol, and they can't do it, you're putting it to them and they can't do it. I mean, at least lie to me, be like, oh, you're right, I'm gonna go read a book, and then dip around the corner and grab a bottle. At least lie to me. But to just
outright
blatant, give me the money, I'll take the money. What about when she finally gets to university and the professors are able to explain her lineage and give sort of a point of reference for why her people are the way they are, why her mother is who she is, and she wants so desperately to communicate this to her mother, and her mom just doesn't get it.
Yeah.
She's accused of acting too good.
Yeah. Or maybe her mom just doesn't want to see it. I mean, there's something her mom says, like something like, I don't know how to be a parent for you. I'm a fuck up. She really individualizes it, as opposed to understanding that maybe it's because of her past or other things that have happened. She just thinks she's a fuck up. So it's almost like an excuse for all the pain and suffering she's brought on to her family.
It's internalized shame.
Yeah.
It's internalized failure. It's this internalized, this is what I am and who I will be and always be.
Yeah, can't change.
Can't change.
Yeah.
And again, this goes back to why we opened the episode talking about like what we tell ourselves about who we are, the best versions of ourselves that we want to be. As soon as we go, there's nothing I can do, I'm a fuck up, I mean, it's kind of over.
Yeah. Hey, I say act too good. Do it.
Yes. Act too good, y'all. She gets this standing rock, which she's really excited about for this protest. And I think we all read about that. I remember when that was happening. And she gets a text that her mother, that she's gone. And there's mixed feelings about this. I mean, I think it is really poetic. She's in her homelands. She's in a teepee looking up at the cross of the teepee into the sky, and she's cold. She's outside. She's in her homelands. She's protesting for her people. She's protesting for her lands, and her mother dies. I mean, it is almost poetic that that's where she is when she finds out this news. I mean, it almost feels like the best place for her.
Mhm.
And as much as she feels grief and sadness, she feels relief. You know, finally, this woman's suffering is over. And I think her being in her homelands made her feel like her ancestors were carrying her and giving her some solace. And it's funny to me, you know, we reel on a lot about religion on the show. I'm not bothered by people that talk about their ancestors at all.
Not at all. No.
It does not bother me in the least. In fact, it does give me solace. It makes me think of my own ancestors that have gone before me. It makes me think of my father. That brings comfort and peace to me, knowing that those people are still a part of our lives and their energy is around us and supporting us and comforting us and moving us forward. That gives me so much more peace and comfort than thinking about a god. Even though she talks about creator, it doesn't bother me as
It
much.
doesn't even feel like that. Yeah.
If there's something more earthy about it.
It's not so lectury, you know?
Yeah.
It feels like you're honoring something that's part of you
Yes.
and your history.
That's greater than you and that you're a part of, like a mosaic of life.
Not just something that's greater than you that's judging you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great energy we're all a part of.
Yeah. It's respecting your history and your community.
And really seeing that life is very short and and really quite meaningless, but also meaningful at the same time.
You're part of someone else's history as well. So it's not just about getting to heaven, you know. You're trying to make sure that your kids, your grandkids, all the generations after you,
Yeah.
like you're setting them up well.
Yeah, it's like anti-individualism.
Yeah.
What did you think about what she was saying about people who are grieving or in a sacred space and we should surround ourselves with them?
I thought that was so beautiful.
I've never heard anything like that before.
There's so many things she said, but yeah, that was
Oh, this whole death has power
it's
thing at the end?
powerful. It's so powerful what
Whew.
she's saying, because you're in another, it's almost a different state of mind, I think, in grief. And you've experienced it more recently than I have. It is a sacred space. You need to respect it.
You're more alive.
Mm-hmm.
You're literally reckoning that death is part of life, and it's this thing that's right there in your face, and you have to look at it and deal with it, and it's so final.
I like what you said about great grief is born from love.
Yeah.
It's almost like if you love more, you grieve more.
Yeah. And I love when she talked about the ceremony of letting them go, and that you speak to your ancestors that have passed and say, don't look back, keep going, like we're okay. And I think it's true. She talks about how there's this idea that indigenous people walk with a sense of lineage, and it's different from non-indigenous people.
True.
Do you think that's true?
I think that's true.
I think it's big time true.
But it did make me think, like, if your ancestors are with you, it'd be interesting for me to know what that meant, because I really don't know anybody past my grandparents.
Well, and your people, T, have a long history of suffering as well that you probably carry with you in ways that you don't recognize or know. Remember when I was reading that Sarah Vowell book And I was reading about McKinley, and
Oh, yeah.
he referred to the people in the Philippines as his little brown brothers.
Yes.
And I think then promptly slaughtered them. But
Yes.
your people are also a people of suffering, T.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and the biggest thing she said that like blew me away, and I don't know why it just did, but when she talks about how our lives are enriched by trauma and nobody can teach you what you learn from this. It cannot be taught. It is only from experiencing it and going through it.
Yeah.
And that's scary. It's the unknown, but it also is like just so empowering to know that you can be enriched from your trauma. And then I loved it that she celebrates her siblings by saying their names. And again, that's just such a beautiful way to, it's like a lovely sentiment to commend them. I want to name their names because they're worthy of it, because they're doing the work to undo the hurts from generations past. She's such a bright light, and she didn't share in this episode, but I know for a fact just from talking to her that she's doing big things for her community, and I can't wait to see what comes from her. You're in good pipe. Thank you for listening. This has been an episode of Trauma Bonded. You can find our show where podcasts are kept. If you like us, please rate and review us on Apple or other places. Rate us 5 stars and write, I like it, I love it, I want some more of it. And that's it. It takes seconds. And thanks to Aaron Goodpipe for sharing their story and giving us the opportunity to talk about it. And thanks to the This Is Actually Happening team, including Whit, Missildine, and Andrew Waits, and the maker of our music and website, Bodily. And thank you to beautiful Cathy Sitzes for editing this episode, and Katie Capel for building those blasted Instagram posts. You can contact us at traumabondedpod@gmail.com and find us on Instagram at traumabondedpodofficial, or visit our website at traumabondedpod.com. And we are going to have a storyteller follow-up for y'all yet this month. So look for it toward the end of March. Right, T?
That's right.
You don't know.
That's right.
T doesn't know. We are trauma bonded to the story, to the storyteller, to the listeners, and to each other. Oh, and I almost forgot, special shout out to Todd Redenbaum of Bunny Hugs. What is it? Bunny Hugs and Mental Health Podcast. Aaron Goodpipe was also on his show, and he referred her to This Is Actually Happening. So go find that episode if you want to hear a more in-depth interview with Aaron and Todd.
Great.
Thanks for spending time with us today. Love you, T.
Love you, Elly. Good job. Hey, thank you.
Hey, thank you. Okay. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Trauma Bond.